Welcome to Indivisible. I'm your host, John Stubbins. Thanks for joining us tonight, America. We're going to pick up where we left off last week with Stacy Washington. She's the co-chair of Project 21, and Stacy on the right, and board of advisors for Black Voices for President Trump. Welcome to the show, Stacy.
Hey, John. Thank you for having me on today.
We're so glad to have you back. We're not going to have Melissa Isaac on today. Unfortunately, they had tornadoes in Alabama last night, and currently Melissa does not have power. So unfortunately, she won't be able to join us today as a legal analyst. But Stacy, I want to get right to it. You had an op-ed that you came out with that's circulating all over the country, and I found it fascinating when I read it today. I want you to tell our viewers about the op-ed and why it's so crucial. We've got prisoners being let out across the country during this pandemic, and really it's not doing us any favors.
Well, John, actually, since the op-ed went live last Thursday, as it was being picked up, we had yet another prisoner who was released early to protect him from COVID-19, who actually went out and within 24 hours of being released, murdered someone. But that happened too late for me to update the article with it. Yeah. So what's happening here is I received a request that basically, do you support or oppose the release of these prisoners on compassionate grounds for to protect them and to protect the general population of prisoners from COVID-19 and the spread? And I immediately, of course, I had an opinion on that because I've been reading these stories, and it's two groups of stories, John. The first group of stories is people like you and me. A woman, she's out driving in her car somewhere in the Midwest, and she's stopped, and the police officer gives her a citation because she's supposed to be at home. But she wasn't actually in the car with anyone else. She's on a road with her car windows up. She has no danger of spreading COVID-19 or catching it, yet she was cited. Now, that sounds kind of Gestapo-like, doesn't it, John?
Yes.
Well, moving on, you have this story that went national out of San Diego, California. You've got this guy out in the ocean, paddle boarding by himself. He gets cited. He's arrested. He's told, look, you can't be out on the ocean by yourself. You have to stay at home. Now, again, he's alone. He's in the ocean. Fish can't catch COVID-19, so he was in no danger of spreading it, but he is given the citation and arrested. Now, that's the one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is what we just discussed, which is prisoners, and we should say convicted felons. By very nature of them being criminals, they're people who've shown a propensity that they don't want to follow the law. They're lawbreakers. So how can we expect people like that? And this is something that I bring forward in the op-ed. How can we expect people like that to follow our newly found rules that really aren't enforceable because they do not have the weight of the law? Social distancing practices are new and are not yet codified into law. How can we expect these same people who don't respect our current laws on the books to not only respect, but follow the laws that we've been putting out there, these rules and regulations around social distancing?
Right.
So I start off by talking about California Governor Gavin Newsom, John, who made this statement. He said, and this was April 2nd, he talked about ushering in the new progressive era. And he said, quote, absolutely, we see this as an opportunity to reshape the way we do business and how we govern. So he laid it out there for Americans that in his mind, even though COVID-19 is a pandemic, it has political implications in that Democrats can use it to grab more power and to exert more power and control over citizens, regardless of what they actually have the right to do. So I go on in the piece and I outline how ridiculous it is, first of all, to release prisoners. When I was on active duty, whenever we would simulate wartime conditions, we would go on shifts. So 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And the 12 hours on would be for sometimes 7 days on and then 1 day off, or 6 days on and 1 day off. You never had more than 1 day off. And we had to simulate like we were in a war, which meant eating on shifts, going to work on shifts, taking breaks on shifts, even exiting the wartime theater in shifts so that we could be decontaminated, because this was war games. We're practicing for real war. Yes. So if that works for thousands, tens of thousands of troops on a base, then it could certainly work for troops, or not troops, but prisoners in prison environments. You have them eat on shifts. You have them go out into these, break areas in shifts, and they practice social distancing. And that way, no one has to be released. I point out in the piece, to kind of wrap it up, that it is so disheartening during a time where we're all naturally afraid of catching the virus. We're all naturally concerned about the ability of our health insurance, our healthcare system to be able to take care of an influx of people who have this disease, which no one is really an expert at treating it just yet. To also have to worry about criminals being out performing crimes on us because we're their unwitting victims, because do-gooders have it in their head that what they really need to be addressing right now is where criminals, their danger is, as opposed to protecting the law-abiding citizens that pay their salaries.
Yeah. And it's to me, it's just outright insanity. I've been following this story even obviously over the last few months. So this has been building, and the Democrats, they want all these prisoners free. Let them all go. Let in, obviously this ties into the open borders situation and just idiotic decision-making that neither you nor I will ever understand. And they're unleashing these people into our neighborhoods, and fend for yourself, I guess, is the message, right? Nobody seems to care. So it's just, this really bothers me, Stacey. And I don't know what's going to end up happening, but like you said, I saw the same story you did. As soon as the guy was released, he goes out and commits a murder. Where's the talk about that? Where's the outrage?
I think, well, there are plenty of people who are outraged, right? You are outraged. I'm outraged. A lot of law-abiding citizens are outraged. But the people we need to be outraged are not outraged, because to them, it's kind of like, well, that happened, but it's still not as bad as if we left these prisoners where they were and they had, an outbreak of COVID-19. So I think the most important thing that we can do is what I call for in the very end of the article. I absolutely want people to have an attitude that is, people deserve an opportunity to either earn your vote or earn you tossing them out on their rear end the next time they're up for a re-election.
Yes. Any
person who is in favor of releasing prisoners right now should be voted out of office at the next opportunity. It's outrageous because, the other metrics are up as well. Crime is up a little bit. But the bigger number, domestic violence, is through the roof. They're anywhere from 10 to 30% nationwide. But if you go to the hotspots, the domestic violence calls are up 400%. So what does that mean for Americans? Well, it means that a lot of people who would normally not be at home, they'd be traveling, they'd be working, whatever they'd be doing, now they're at home. All of their kids are home, and whatever problems have been going on. I've even seen an uptick in people planning on divorcing their spouse after the quarantine's over, because they've now come to realize, because they're spending 24 hours a day with their spouse, that their spouse is cheating on them. So all of these things are happening, and it's not a vacuum. It's all happening together. It's a roiling boil of different unintended consequences of having every American and all of their kids all the way through, college age at home at the same time. So now we have to look at what we can do to help people, right, John? The idea is, instead of looking to the criminals and trying to figure out what we can do for them, how about if we do something for the people who are law-abiding and tax-paying and are sitting at home trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet, right? Because maybe they're in retail, they're losing their job. So it never fails. Whenever there's a crisis, whenever there's a problem, you have liberals out there making it worse for everybody who's doing all the working and paying and all of that. If you're not doing anything with yourself, if you're a criminal, if you're some kind of ne'er-do-well, if you're an illegal alien like Gavin Newsom giving, taxpayer dollars to I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens are going to be helped by that measure that he's planning on taking. And there are people in California who are currently out of work because of AB 5, their ridiculous attempt at crushing the gig economy. So all of these things are happening together. It's like everywhere you look, you can find a problem, and then directly connected to that problem, you'll find a liberal trying to fix it by making it 100 times worse. So that's what they're doing here with this releasing of the prisoners, and it has to stop.
Yeah, and money grows on trees out in California, apparently. We're going to take a quick break. America will be right back with Stacey Washington. We're back, folks. I'm going to go on here with my monologue. Since before President Lincoln, the black community has been lied to by Democrats, and this ties into what Stacey and I are talking about. So here's a news flash, Democrats. The black community is now getting wise to your propaganda and your lies. And that's why the left wants open borders. It's why they want sanctuary cities. The Democrats will take your money, taxpayers, okay? And they want to give it to the illegal aliens and the criminals trying to get their votes, because that's who matters, right? Not taxpayers, but criminals and illegal aliens. These are also jobs that are taken away from the black community. So as we go on to talk about this today, Democrats, you are voting for the party designing your own demise. Think about that for just a minute. You've been voting for the very people that are killing you, whether it be through abortion, whether it be through jobs, whether it be through education, it doesn't matter. They're killing you every time you turn. You know, the whites that lead the Democratic Party, these are anarchists. These are Saul Alinsky-ites, okay? These people hate America. They want to bring America down. I was just reading Joe Biden accepting endorsements from jihadist and radical people. You know, Nancy Pelosi, again, holding up another bill for the American people because she wants to take care of illegals. You know, Candace Owens really said it best. And I think this was about a week ago that I read this, maybe 2 weeks ago. But Candace said, the left is hostile to America. You know, April 10th on PragerU, the post was, Black Americans don't have to be Democrats. And that's exactly right. They don't have to be Democrats. You've been kowtowed and lied to for so long that you just bought into this narrative that these people have the upper hand. And like I said in part one last week, it is the Democrats that is the party of the KKK. It is the Democrats that was the party of slavery. It is the Democrats that resisted civil rights. Okay? We've got Walter E. Williams, professor of economics at George Mason University, talking about manipulation through racial hoaxes. In the op-ed, Andy Ngo says universities too often serve as hate crime hoax mills. Think about that. St. Olaf College in Minnesota, mass anti-racism protests that caused classes to be canceled. It turns out a black student activist was found to be responsible for a racist threat that she left on her own car, but she blamed white people. 5 black students at the United States Air Force Academy claimed there were racial slurs marked on their dorm room doors. Turns out that one of the 5 black men was responsible for the vandalism and the lie. So college campuses are yet another vehicle that's destroying Black America through leftist indoctrination, and they encourage these racial hoaxes and lies. And the sooner that people figure that out, the better off they're going to be. Yamiche Alcindor, black woman, PBS, White House correspondent, accused the U.S. Surgeon General, Jerome Adams, a black man, of racism for employing terms commonly used by Adams with his own family. Alcindor is the same black racist that challenged President Trump in March when the president stated the coronavirus was from Wuhan, China, a virus which it is from Wuhan, China. Alcindor says that makes the president a bigot and a racist, and anyone who disagrees with her is labeled a racist or a bigot. Everyone is a racist, and if you're white, you're a racist and a bigot. That's what she believes. Even black people that disagree with her, they are also racist. And we are sick and tired of your race pimping, and it ties directly in to the op-ed that Stacey wrote about these criminals. We don't want these criminals being released into our communities. What do you think about these posts here that I just rattled off, Stacey?
Well, so what's interesting is that I routinely run an experiment on Twitter, and it's really simple. Anytime a leftist disagrees with me, I look at their disagreement, and if I can find even the slightest bit of superiority, or, hey, I'm taking one for the team because I'm a liberal, or you can't think like that because you're black and I need to tell you how to think because I'm a white liberal, anything like that, any tinge of that. And I immediately simply boil it down to their primary argument, which is that everyone, you, me, my dog, who happens to be white, we're all racist. So I simply say, you can't say that to me. I'm black. You're a racist.
Right.
And they always say, I'm married to a black person. I've adopted a black kid. All my friends are black. Whatever any reason they can come up with, they always say, how dare you call me a racist? And I always reply, how dare you tell me how to think?
Right.
I've been thinking for myself since I was born, but specifically, I've been thinking under my own power and operating under my own power since I was an adult. When I went off to college, and then after I came back home and stayed for a year and joined the Air Force, I've been thinking on my own. So it's been a long time. It's not like I just started yesterday. I've been thinking on my own for a very long time. My decision to be a Republican, a Christian conservative who happens to vote Republican, is not based upon someone else's feelings or what someone else told me to think or what someone's paying me to do. Because contrary to popular belief, it's not actually lucrative to be a black conservative. There's nothing lucrative about it. In fact, there's there's a tiny handful of very famous, well-paid black conservatives. And the rest of us are just out here doing this because we believe in it. We're true believers.
Yes.
I can tell you, John, I've never had one of them say, well, wait a minute. No, wait. Okay. Yeah, I have. I have had one of them say, oh, wait, I never thought that me telling you that you're wrong for being a Republican could be construed as racism. And he said, I'm not a racist, by the way. I said, I actually don't think you're a racist. I just think it's fun to call you one because that's what your side always does to me. Yeah. I must hate myself. I must hate black people because I'm voting with the Republicans. And he said, well, I would never accuse you of being racist against yourself. And I would never actually be racist towards you. We actually had a dialogue. It went on for a little bit, a few tweets, and then we agreed to disagree and moved on about our business. But most of the time, so the other 99% of the time, it is, you can't call me a racist. How dare you? How dare you call me a racist when you support a racist, which is President Trump? And also, you're still wrong. And also, you can't think for yourself and you hate black people, yada, yada, yada. So they just hold the line, even though I've just explained to them that the line that they're holding is utterly racist. They might as well be putting a rope around my neck and dragging me around with their thought processes, which, by the way, John, it's the worst nincompoops, idiots without two brain synapses that fire correctly, people who can't string two coherent thoughts together, who hold opposing ideas in the same brain, who are always telling me how I can't be or think the way that I want to be or think. So, it's not surprising to hear Yamiche Alcindor is up to her same old. They pay her to do that crap. They pay her to go to the White House and sit in those chairs and say idiotic things to the president. They actually applaud her for doing that. They encourage that bad behavior. Meanwhile, they like to mock Chanel Rion for her family history and everything else, when Chanel actually asks great questions, and she's a part of a network at OANN where they're actually bringing hard news, not just opinion, hard news they're bringing over there. So it's interesting to see Yamiche she's an amazingly famous journalist, and she gets all these accolades and she's treated with such an enormous amount of respect, but she does not bring her best work to that space when she's dealing with President Trump. In my opinion, she routinely embarrasses herself because the questions that she asks have a juvenile twinge to them. It's as if she hates him and she's there to try to make him look bad, as opposed to asking him tough questions. And that if he can't answer them, hey, that's on President Trump. But he's always able to answer. And every week he has to smack her down at least once, which to me, that's embarrassing. That's not what you want to go do on your job. Have the person that's the target of your questions routinely making you look like a fool. But that's what happens.
You're absolutely right. We're going to take a quick break, America. We'll be right back. We're back with Stacey Washington, folks. I saw yesterday, it like you said, every time there's a catastrophe, every time there's an opportunity to use something, they do. And I'm sure that you saw this. Laura Bush and Michelle Obama teamed up to go raise $128 million for the World Health Organization, who lied to all of us, by the way. It's just like they cannot help themselves. And by the way, while we're on the subject of famous Democrats, I've got to put this in here because I'm sick of seeing these names. Jay-Z, Beyonce, Christine Teigen, John Legend, they're all part of this leftist conspiracy, by the way. And they are racist, by the way. And they're responsible for rhetoric that is racist and pitting us against one another, brainwashing Black people through their music and thinking that because people buy their music that they're going to automatically accept their political beliefs. And it's just disgusting. The View asked Kamala Harris about a week or so ago to go trash President Trump as a drug pusher over the Quiliquine, the drug that's saving people's lives. They actually asked Kamala Harris to go trash the president as a drug pusher. Can you believe that?
So, wait a minute. If you have COVID-19 and President Trump is, as they say, let's take their premise, he's a drug pusher, that he's the drug pusher you need because that hydrochloroquine is what you need right now. I'm just saying, if that's the kind of drug pusher he's going to be, push on, President Trump. This is about saving lives. And, name calling is interesting, but the president has been geared towards results from day one. And so John, is it okay if I just say that there's actually a solution? We have rampant poverty in America, not as bad as a lot of other countries who mask their poverty through socialist type programs, which bring everyone down to, closer to being poverty stricken. Here in America, we have a meritocracy and we have capitalism, but we do have, a flawed system. If humans are involved, there will be flaws. Sure. There's no perfect system, and the poor will always be with us. The Bible tells us that. So there is no, we're going to wipe poverty out and it's never going to be around. But at least in America, when you start out poor, most poor in America, except for the generationally poor, persistently poor, if you take that segment out, the rest of the poor in America move up the ladder from poor to working class to middle class, and then from there on up. And in America, the top 10% of Americans, even those who have their wealth come to them through inheritance, they move in and out of the top 10%. They sometimes drop down into the middle class through their own actions and poor decision making, or through market downturns, and so on and so forth. So our society is very fluid. You can grow up homeless, sleeping in your car, and be valedictorian of your high school, go to Harvard, start a business, and be a millionaire. This happens in America regularly. So I always think when I hear things like Michelle Obama and whoever that was you just said, or they're out. Laura Bush, who we ain't even gonna get started on the Bushes. No. They're out raising money for the World Health Organization. So they'd rather raise money for an organization that's wholly owned by the Chinese, the Chi-Coms, the communists, than they would respect the decision of President Trump to defund them so they can experience the pain of their poor decision making, and rather raise $128 million and pour that money directly into, let's say, oh, I don't know, Baltimore. Because think about Baltimore first, just a quick second. A friend of mine named Kimberly Klasick, who happens to be permanently tan like me, is running for a congressional seat there. The one that was it John Lewis? I believe he passed away and emptied that seat out, and now she's running for that seat. He did nothing for those people. Rat infestations. Mr. Pressler, Scott Pressler, traveled to Baltimore. They donned hazmat suits and removed, I don't know, it was like 20 tons of garbage, cleaned out whole neighborhoods. Yes. They boarded up buildings. They made these neighborhoods safe for Baltimore residents. Now, remember, Scott doesn't live in Baltimore, Maryland. He lives in D.C. somewhere. He travels all over the country cleaning up the trash that liberals leave behind with their failed policies. Now, Kim wants to go in there and be elected, and she's made some pretty hefty promises, but she also has plans on how to back them up. She wants to make the people in Baltimore, to make their living conditions reflect the same living conditions that you would have when you have someone going to Congress and earning $170,000 a year and living very well themselves, as John Lewis did before he passed away. He lived very well, nothing like his constituents.
Right.
So the question is, what could $128 million do in Baltimore? Well, I'll just go through the top 5 things that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm a wife and a mom, so I know how to spend money, but I also know how to budget it. I know how to invest it. I know how to make it, but I'm best at spending it. So let's talk about spending it well. We could go into Baltimore and we could raise how many houses? If it costs between $9,000 and $30,000 per house to raise a building that is currently a crack den or a place where children go in to play and end up getting abducted and sold into sex slavery, how many of those buildings could we raise? What if we said we'll just take 10 of those buildings and raise them and make community gardens, and then the rest of that $128 million will utilize on anti-poverty programming, meaning educating on people how to live better, making them acquainted with the programs that currently exist where they get free job training and free interventions, maybe starting some community centers and Head Start programs so kids who are currently unsupervised would have that supervision so their parents could go out and maybe get that job, the one that they're not getting because they don't have any childcare. Do I need to go on, or is there, because there's also just the per child cost. I think King Face is his name. He says it costs 35 cents per kid per day in America to make sure that they're never hungry again. 35 cents a day. That's in America. So for kids who have food insecurity, I'm sure if they knew that Michelle Obama, who currently owns 6 homes, she has 6 homes that they own, she and her husband. And I don't begrudge her any of it because I'm not jealous at all. I love what God has given to me, what my husband has earned and bought for our family. I enjoy it and I don't want anything more. But I do think it's hypocritical of her to use the language of socialists and to lord her apparent wisdom over us while she owns 6 homes and is doing nothing to eradicate poverty herself. She's a Black woman, permanently tan like myself. We are supposed to be intimately acquainted with the needs of our community, so-called. I've been told so many times by liberals that I don't care about Black people. I don't want to do anything for Black people. Meanwhile, I've spent years writing about school choice and pro-life issues, both of which heavily impact the Black community. And Michelle Obama, instead of raising $128 million to eradicate poverty in one section of Chicago, because in Chicago, $128 million wouldn't do it. Not even close. It would just handle one small neighborhood on the South Side. But she could say, I'll start in Baltimore because it's closer to the mansion that they own on the water in Martha's Vineyard. I mean, she could just say, I'll eradicate poverty in one small neighborhood adjacent to a property that we own. She could eradicate poverty in some area of Hawaii because they own a house there, or the one in Chicago, or the house in Colorado, Washington, D.C. There's plenty of poverty in D.C. Everywhere she owns a home, there's poverty, and she could do something about it. But instead, she's virtue signaling with none other than one of the Bushes to make it look like she really cares about people, when in reality, the actions that you take when you care about someone are actions that are direct and demonstrably quantifiable to that person's current situation. What American is going to benefit from $128 million going to the World Health Organization, who takes their marching orders from China?
Yeah. And, again, what's most disturbing, all of everything you just said makes sense. And think about all the good that could be done with that $128 million in a place like Baltimore. But what's even most disturbing, even beyond all that, is that we know now that the World Health Organization has lied to the American people.
Mm-hmm.
That should be enough to discredit you. That should be enough to tell you that you've got Michelle Obama and Laura Bush out raising money for an organization that hates our country.
Mm-hmm.
That should be enough to disturb you.
And they're only angry because they don't get the money from us anymore. In other words, the same thing President Trump has been saying for decades. He's literally been saying these same things for 40 some odd years. And it's true. I think the most glaring example that he is the right tool for the right job is the fact that he's not made any of these things. They're not his recent policy positions.
Sure.
When he was a businessman in New York and he was getting interviewed on CNN and Oprah, and he was going into the city council meetings in New York and talking about the different things that were happening just in New York that he thought were idiotic business practices, the way they were handling certain neighborhoods, he would talk about the common sense solution to these things. And people would say, oh, you sound so presidential, or you sound like someone who's about to make a run. Are you going to run for mayor? And he's like, no, I've got business to run. I think politicians should handle these problems and let business people like myself run businesses and, create opportunities within these cities. And so he's been saying this for years about making bad deals with our trading partners, namely China. He's been saying that for years. So here's China. And there's a really embarrassing situation for them reporting out of China. And obviously, there's the stuff you see online, and then there's the mainstream media stuff. But the people on the ground are saying there are like 22 million fewer cell phone signals in New York than there were this time a year ago. So they may have had as many as 22 million deaths from COVID-19, and we're buying their malarkey that they've only had 3,500 in a nation of 1.5 billion. Meanwhile, we have 320 million people, 330, and we have had 30,000 some odd deaths from coronavirus. So
which is way too many, but it's a lot less than they thought.
It is absolutely too many, but it is far below the projection of 2 million possible deaths. And then they said not 2 million, 200,000. We're still well below that. So what we're looking at is a second influenza season. So the first influenza season, I don't even know what the current number is, but earlier this year, we were at like 22,000 deaths from influenza since the start of the season in the fall of last year. So we're looking at basically a second influenza season this year during this season. So it's horrifying. I can't believe that we actually have that many influenza deaths. On bad years, we have 80,000 deaths from influenza in America.
Right.
And we never have a social distancing. We don't have masks. We don't pause the economy. People say that's because we have a vaccine for that. And once we have a vaccine for COVID-19, we will no longer have to take these precautions. And I understand being careful. And we have immune compromised children. 2 of our 3 kids are immune compromised. So I'm right there with you on being safe. But the idea that we're going to let foreign countries off the hook for what they're doing. I mean, the UK spent, what was it? $29 million, $30 million on some antibody test kits that they were shipped from China, only to have them arrive and find out that they don't work. They were sold a bunch of nothing kits. So the UK should be holding China responsible for that. We should hold China responsible for their lies and how they allowed people to travel out of Wuhan and Hubei province to the United States and to Iran. I mean, we have to thank COVID-19 for wiping out a bunch to the mullahs. But the point is, there are a bunch of Iranian citizens who have COVID-19 who they don't deserve that. Those Iranian citizens are not our enemies. It's the leadership there. So we have a reckoning that has to occur. And we say this a lot, like every 10 years or so, China will do something horrible, like poison our dog food or something. And it's always an accident, but it's terrible. And then we're like, we're going to stop buying stuff from China. And then within 12 months, we're back to buying our $9.99 t-shirts from there and all of our towels and whatnot. What we need to do this time is really be serious about it, because they've stopped our economy. They've literally put our entire lives on hold, and that has to be paid for. And so, people like Michelle Obama, John, they're always going to be doing the wrong thing. That Bush girl, that she's always going to be on the wrong side of what needs to be done. But for the rest of us, we need to remember this. Our memories need to be long, and we need to pay attention and change our purchasing habits on Amazon and You go to the store and you're at Walmart, look for the things that say American made and pay a little extra. We all have too much, except for the poor among us. We all have a little, a little bit that we can sacrifice, pay a little extra for that Instapot or whatever to get the one that's made in the US, and just see what we can do to lessen our reliance on them, because they're never going to change. And we're always going to have useful idiots in America who will help them, like Michelle Obama.
And if people out there aren't seeing a clear pattern here, then you don't want the truth. You honestly don't. You want lied. You want to be lied to. If you can't see the indoctrination, the brainwashing, the lies, the propaganda, you think that this doesn't end up affecting all of our communities here in America? You've got another thing coming. We'll be right back, America, with Stacey Washington. We're back with Stacey Washington. I want to go on with our conversation. We're bouncing back and forth here, but I want to go on here with my monologue, because this is not what people fought for during the civil rights era. I don't believe it. This is simple. We're seeing reverse racism, which is for power and for vengeance. When the lies are this frequent and consistent, anyone with a brain should be able to see what the left is trying to accomplish. Okay? Basically, oppression of blacks is bad and oppression of whites is now good. So, during the civil rights era, you had black people being oppressed, which we went to fix that. Okay? So now let's fix that. And now let's get back at the people, even though they didn't do it, let's get back at their relatives that were part of their line. It's just absurd. This is the end result of all this mess on the left. It's got to be confronted and exposed every time. We've got to stand tall. We've got to speak the truth. Good people are listening. Good people are listening out there. And we know that what they're after is power. Now, one other group I didn't mention is women. And I'm talking about women that will lie to a judge. I know we had hit on this with Melissa last time. They'll lie to a court of law. They'll use manipulation to control the biological father. This is real, okay? These women are evil. Women can be evil. Women can be criminals. They can be corrupt. And yes, they can be ruthless criminals. Follow the money, okay? Everything we've discussed ties in and in resulting in violence. Because when people have had enough, that's what it ends up being. When you people are pushed that far where they see no other way to deal with it. And you could see this. I don't know if you saw No Safe Spaces. My friend Mark Joseph produced it. And they were dealing with, campus indoctrination and no free speech by conservatives. And Dennis Prager had dealt with these. He was talking with these 4 black gentlemen, and you could see on the face of this one black youth that he could not stand Dennis Prager, and you could see the hate, even though everything Prager was saying was to try to get them to come together and understand what the left has done to the black community. He was trying to explain how the lies of and how they've affected even on college campuses. And, no father in the home to guide young minds. I know this also picks up where we were talking about. These minds are being manipulated and used for hate by the left. This ties directly into every part of the entire picture, everything that George Soros wants, by the way. All of it contributes to a breakdown of manners, decency, law and order, respect for others, plus their views, a breakdown of the family, our streets, our schools, our towns. It all leads to violence. It leads to depression, hatred, mental illness. just the moral fabric of our society at large. I know that you had talked about Stacy. I know that this is something we didn't get to last time, but Ferguson, Missouri, for example, Michael Brown is a perfect example of how the lack of consequences is hurting everyone, and it sends a bad message that if you ask a Democrat, Michael Brown was an angel. Okay, he did nothing wrong. He was murdered by the police. That's what a Democrat will tell you. They won't tell you that this young man just robbed a store, that he confronted police and ensued picking a fight with police. Who does that? Who does that? Really. And how much damage was done because this one thug decides he's not going to obey law and order in a town like Ferguson? Where was the father in Michael Brown's life? We saw him on TV later after Michael Brown was killed, but where was he all the years prior to that? Where was he in steering Michael Brown to not go rob that store or not go confront police officers in a fight?
I don't know. I mean, I when I say I don't know, I shrug and I throw my hands up, because the story of Mike Brown, first of all, it's a really sad story, because if you have someone that you want to take to kind of this martyr status where they're the t-shirts and the sweatshirts and the hats and the memorabilia, you want that person to be a true hero or a true kind of sob story, a story that it's a tragedy. And with Mike Brown, the tragedy is how much misinformation is out there surrounding his death and the actions taken by not just the officer, but everyone who had anything to do with it, from the district attorney, everybody. And there have just been millions of dollars poured into the Brown family because of the tragedy.
Yes.
And they've been able to enrich themselves, and they've come out none the better for it. It's like those websites that sometimes, I know you've probably seen it, John. All of us have been to at least one of them, where you go there and you find out what the last 10 lottery winners in your state are doing with themselves. And it's interesting because there are people out there who maintain these websites where they meticulously track their trajectory of the people who end up winning the lottery. And a very small portion of the people who win the lottery, especially the mega millions, the biggest jackpots.
Sure.
This very small number of them do very well. They give, they pay off their debts, they pay off all their kids' debts. They do something with their lives, and they're still pretty wealthy, 10 years later, 20 years later. But 9 out of the 10 that you look up, they're worse off than they were before they won the lottery. Because before they won the lottery, they had a job. They had a community that was around them. They had a life. Now their life has been utterly picked apart and destroyed, and they're broke, worse than they were before. And so it's that same type of thing. You see that happen with lottery winners, and it's a kind of a lottery, but a lottery of tragedy that the Brown family is currently presiding over, where they've had everyone from her employer pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into their family, literal cash into their family, only to have them, just like they went before the UN and accused America of war crimes. I mean, just the craziest stories. It's like a reality television show gone bad. And out of it, instead of us having, a Mike Brown Memorial Center where kids go to learn about proper interaction with the police and about following and obeying all of the orders, not just direct orders from police, because people act as if the police are the only ones who give you direct orders. You get a direct order from the IRS every year on April 15th, sure. Pay or receive a penalty, right, and then still pay. You receive direct orders every day of your life. Someone in authority is telling you, you will drive no more than 70 miles an hour or you'll be subject to a ticket. You will drive no more than 20 miles over the speed limit or you'll be subject to reckless driving and being arrested on the spot. You can't just go do anything you want to do. People will tell you you can't do that. And if you defy that, they'll bring the police or whatever other authority to bear on you. So the idea here is not, well, we need to obey the orders of the police. The idea here is you need to be a law-abiding citizen. And in order to be a law-abiding citizen, you need to have someone have maybe spanked your butt a little bit, maybe yelled at you a little bit, maybe put you in timeout a little bit, maybe talked to you sternly and you cried a little bit, and then you got some hugging and, had your tears dried and maybe had a little bit of ice cream, and we're not doing that again, right? I mean, you need some parenting.
Right.
And if they're not going to get it at home, then they need to get it somewhere else. And in a situation as internationally significant, there are people in foreign countries who know Ferguson more than they know St. Louis. Most foreigners think Ferguson is the size of St. Louis, and St. Louis is the size of Ferguson. Remember, Ferguson is a little hamlet of 22,000 people. It's so small you can drive through it and realize you don't even know you've driven through it. So there's some great people living there. When we went and took our 57 policy recommendations called a blueprint, when we took them to Ferguson, and I got to meet their city council, these are beautiful, wonderful people who want to have a vibrant community, and they want to be known for more than just Mike Brown getting killed there. And so you want to see something good come out of it. And that's not what we've seen. But for me, I can't really stay emotionally charged into what didn't happen in Ferguson. All I can do is I can try to point people to the truth of the matter, which is, I don't care what time of day it is. I don't care if you're, this color or yours or anything in between. You could be the color of this flag back here. You do you. You need to follow the lawful orders of the police.
Yes.
You need to have a moral center that tells you, that's wrong. I don't need a police officer to come over here and tell me it's wrong to stick this man up for some cigars. I need to just not do that because I need to be in school right now. Actually, I need to not be out doing this. We need to have that conversation more than we need to have the conversation surrounding Mike Brown and his family and the other kind of ways that this thing went sideways. A lot of misinformation, but if someone wants the truth, it's out there. And if you get that truth and you hold on to it and you share it with others, that's really the best antidote to what we've seen happen there. And I hope one day, while I'm still an adult and live walking on this earth, we can have conversations about race that center on the fact that any kind of racism is simply a sin that someone is engaging in, no worse or better than any other sin. If I was to gossip to you about someone that I know, if I was to slander someone that we both know or don't know, if I was to rob you or embezzle from you, all of these things are sins, wrong things that people do, a part of the human condition that we have to fight against every day. And so if instead of making racism the one thing, you just racism, that's the one horrible thing. Actually, I think a bigger sin to me, just if you're going to ask me, is, John, if you go get elected to Congress and you tell people every 2 years or every 6 years, if you're a senator, that you're going to make people's lives better, you're going to change their circumstances. And instead of doing that, you enrich yourself and you go in worth, 400,000 and you come out worth 50 million, or like Nancy Pelosi, 350 million. And you haven't changed anybody's life. Like Maxine Waters, she's wealthy. She lives in a mansion outside her district. Her district is a trash can and she's not doing anything for those people. I think that's a bigger sin. I think when you take it upon yourself to become elected and go into leadership and go out and literally impact people's lives, and you don't take the care to impact them positively, you're actually making things worse for yourself. I think there's going to be a special level of hell for those people where they're tormented and they have to live under the same conditions they forced other people to live under, but it's for eternity instead of just, people. Because at least here in America, you can move out of a district like that. If you live in Maxine Waters' district, your number one goal should be to move out of her district. Right. That should be what people are doing in response to the horrific leadership that they're receiving. Or vote her out or move out yourself. But I always go back to that stuff because it's more important than talking about Mike Brown. It's like, what can we do at this point? They're going to keep enriching themselves and lying about what happened, but we could at least try to save some people's lives, change the trajectory of their lives by telling the truth and doing something differently.
Yeah. And when it gets to that point, that late in someone's life, and they still haven't been held accountable by their parents, like you said, where's the upbringing? Where's the discipline? Where's the spanking? Okay. All of these things as you're raising, and you should be raising a child, not letting the state or the city raise your child for you. If you're having children, you should be raising your children, teaching your children. Okay. This doesn't matter if you're white, black, Mexican, doesn't matter. And the same kind of accountability. Look, if you're being held accountable because you're getting into a fight with a police officer. Something went wrong long ago. Okay. You just robbed a store. Now you're picking a fight with a police officer. Same thing with
charging him.
Yeah.
And trying to go for his gun.
Right. To me, charging a police officer doesn't sound like my idea of a good afternoon. Okay. Just like with someone like Nancy Pelosi or Maxine Waters, they need to be held accountable for what they do, for how they've enriched themselves on the backs of Americans. Where is their accountability? In America, we need to start holding these people accountable. I don't care if it's a criminal youth like Mike Brown was, or if it's a criminal senator or a congressman or a congresswoman like Pelosi or Waters. It doesn't
or the people
matter.
who run PG&E. They're one of my prime examples of what happens when people don't do their jobs. People die. PG&E executives, all the way down to the guys who didn't trim the dry brush around their electric wires, are responsible for the deaths of all those people in California when the wildfires were raging, the loss of those multiple billions of dollars worth of homes and businesses and livelihoods that were destroyed. Those people should be held accountable. We have it's an epidemic of individuals going around doing things, either not doing their jobs or doing their jobs poorly and not being held accountable. And the minute you try to hold someone accountable, to kind of come full circle here, John, to back to what you originally, and a couple segments ago, you mentioned the fact that President Trump had defunded the World Health Organization. What President Trump is trying to do is give consequences for bad behavior. Actions should lead to natural consequences.
Yes.
So the natural consequence of the WHO lying to Americans, making it possible for Americans to die from coronavirus, making it that we had to shut our economy down instead of just managing it. Because had the WHO informed everyone that there was an outbreak in China and it was from a viral lab and that it was actually something that could be managed by stopping travel, nations would have done that, and we would have had an outbreak in China that they would have managed. They could have managed it with assistance from the World Health Organization and other nations who would have sent people in to help. But the rest of our countries, specifically Italy, Iran, and America, and South Korea, we wouldn't have had these issues. We wouldn't have had these huge numbers. So President Trump defunds them to show them that our money actually has strings attached to it.
That's right.
It's a reward for doing your job well. And if you're going to be some little third world tin pot puppet for a first world dictatorship like China, then you're not going to get American dollars. And so that is the natural consequence. And I just think it's crazy that President Trump would try to give a natural consequence, and people in America who have been harmed, we've been harmed. Yeah. Every one of us, even if you don't own a 401k, you don't have investments, you've been harmed. If you are a part of the American economy, you've been harmed.
Yes.
Even if you say on the local level, even if you say, I don't have anything to do with anybody, I'm a hermit, I don't even eat canned goods, I grow stuff on a plot, but your property value has lost value. Your actual amount of cooperation and interaction with your state and local government is in jeopardy, because state and local governments are suffering from a loss of tax revenue from businesses that are currently shuttered. So no matter where you are, if you're a dog walker, your life has been impacted by COVID-19 negatively. And the natural consequence of that should be that American tax dollars should be yanked back, not just the ones that go to the WHO, but we should be yanking back our foreign aid from China as well. Yeah. Anything going to them that we have to actually have to send a check from the Treasury should be stopped, because they are not acknowledging the truth about what's going on over there. So John, I get really fired up about this, because you look around our communities and there's nowhere you can lay your eyes without seeing something that's going wrong because of COVID-19. And there should be somebody who's made to pay for that.
Well, yeah. And not only that, but circling back to your op-ed, which, here we are, we've got, the liberals, they now want to release all these criminals into the streets now, into your neighborhood. Good luck to you. No accountability there, right? So we're already contending with illegal aliens. We're already contending with criminals in our neighborhoods that haven't been imprisoned. Now we've got COVID-19. And now you want to release criminals that are in prison out into our communities. We have nothing else to do, right? So here's my point, America. until you start to stand up and demand that this idiocy stops, you're going to continue to see this, and it is going to destroy our communities. We have to stand up, we have to speak out, and we have to do it loudly. You cannot sit on the sidelines and allow this to happen. It will, if you don't think it'll catch your home, if you think you're immune because you're in the suburbs, I've got a surprise for you. It's coming to your doorstep. And maybe, just maybe, you'll do something when it gets there, if it's not too late.
I don't think it's too late. We have an amazingly resilient society here in America, and we can come back from almost anything. And I think the COVID-19, it will have met its match here in America. We are a praying people. We are also a community that steps up to the plate. If you look at how many hundreds of thousands of masks are being sewn in homes around America right now, some of them by teenagers, and they're being donated. Some of them are being sold online. People are coming up with ways to make money during this horrible shutdown. We're going to come out of this. The question is,
and I want to say real quick, Stacey, I want to salute the patriots out there that are standing up right now. That is our front line. That is our nurses, our doctors, the law enforcement that we have that are doing their job.
Grocery store workers. Yeah,
that's right. The grocery store workers, our local restaurants that are staying open so that we can get food to go. All of these people that are putting themselves at risk. And to normal Americans who maybe aren't doing any of those things, but are making it known that we've got a problem and that we need to stand up and address it. And that pointing out things like we're pointing out today, like, Michelle Obama and Laura Bush going out to try to stomp on the president and override what he's doing, which to me is sickening. When we know that the World Health Organization has lied to us, this really upsets me.
Yeah, it does. But I keep going back to what I'm seeing, not just online, but here in our community here in St. Louis. And we actually have some protests that are going to be happening tomorrow afternoon here locally to protest the St. Louis County Council's decision to extend the stay-at-home orders indefinitely, while the governor has said we're going to begin to slowly reopen methodically, segment by segment on May 3rd. And so the governor is responding to the president saying, look, this is in your wheelhouse. And St. Louis County is saying, yeah, you can do whatever you want, Governor Parsons, but we're going to run our stuff the way we want to because we're liberals and we know better than you. And St. Louis County residents want to see, if it's just logical. John, if I can go to the grocery store with my mask on and buy food every week like I've been doing since this whole thing started, why can't I go to Hobby Lobby and buy some supplies for my kids who are schooling at home?
Yeah,
why can't I? Right,
or paint, or some mulch or whatever. I get you.
Yeah, our home improvement stores are still open, so I have been able to get that stuff. But the stores that are open, like the small businesses that are restaurants, and they've remained open by going to, basically they carry the food to your car, so it's touchless service. Curbside, so the businesses that have been able to do that, amazing. But we can't make a dental appointment here unless you have an abscess or like a root canal that you need. You can't get your teeth cleaned. Why? Why can't the dentist practice the same thing that Aldi is practicing? Aldi takes their square footage, divides it by the social distancing paradigm, and says this many people can be in the building at the same time. If there are that many people in, you have to wait in line to go in. Same thing with Trader Joe's. Same thing with Schnucks, same thing with Walmart, same thing with Lowe's and Home Depot. Why not have that same thing at Hobby Lobby and everywhere else? If we're going to eventually open the country back up and COVID-19 is not going away and the vaccine won't be here for 12 to 18 more months, we have to be able to say, I'm going to wear gloves. I'm going to take my wipes with me. I'm going to wear a mask. I'm going to not stand next to people. If I have a cold or a cough of any kind of fever, I'm not going out of the house. We have to actually give Americans an opportunity to do what it is that the CDC says we're going to do. So those protests will be in our cars. Obviously, we're just going to drive around the building we'll be safe. But we are going to make a statement tomorrow because they don't own us. And we're complying with their stay-at-home order.
Just make sure you guys are, stay safe. Okay.
We're going to be safe. Absolutely.
And obviously healthy. I want to thank Stacey Washington for coming on the show. This was part 2 of our interview from last Monday. If you're following, Stacey, hope you'll come back to the show. We've got a lot more planned, obviously, for the future. And I'll be calling you. I've got some good news to share with you privately.
Just say when, John. Just say when. But I love coming on, and thank you so much for having me here. Indivisible rocks. You rock. And it's just, I love it when I can find someone who's like-minded, who also, you're the king of like this production quality right here. Look at you. You get kudos. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stacey. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining us tonight, America. We enjoyed having Stacey Washington on part 2 of our series with her. Sorry we couldn't have Melissa Isaac, but we will next time. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you